And hopefully, with those more forces, there'll be some stability to Afghanistan, and the Afghans can move forward and take charge of their country. The American army has to get out of Afghanistan over time. I think everyone understands that. Hopefully the surge will work. Hopefully it'll turn the momentum, but the Afghans have to step up. The American army, with all its counterinsurgency doctrines, at the end of the day, is still an occupying army in Afghanistan, and that creates its own problems. And so they need to figure out a way to get out of there and fairly quickly, turn it back over the Afghans, but retain enough presence there with intelligence operatives and assistance to the Afghan military and intelligence organization that al-Qaeda doesn't come back and threaten the United States, Afghanistan, or the neighbors. And so that's where we've got to go, and they've got to figure that out. And I think they will. Again, I think they're trying to figure that out. They've committed to this surge, but after that, they're going to have to figure out a way to bring it down.
Right. You mentioned, I think, more than once that Al-Qaeda, in the space of 37 months, came up with three major operations. That's right. After which, for years, they didn't do much, exactly. At least in the U.S.
Right.
What do you mean by that? And does this mean that that's it for Al-Qaeda when it comes to the U.S.? They can't really do much anymore?
Quite frankly, even though I knew they weren't as strong as people thought after 9/11, when they looked to the skies and thought there'd be another 9/11 every day, knocking down buildings, that was the gut feeling of many Americans. I knew that wasn't the case. But I do mention in my book that in 37 months, they bombed 2 of our embassies in East Africa. They almost sank a warship off of the coast of Yemen, the USS Cole, and then on September 11, 2001, they had the spectacular attacks in New York and in Washington. So these were, the irony of it is before 9/11, when they attacked our embassies and blew up the USS Cole off the coast of Yemen, we didn't get it. We almost ignored those things. They didn't really reach the consciousness of the American people. But then after September 11th, we overreacted. So Americans so the pendulum swings one way and the other, and what we really need to do is try to get the right level of response. And I believe that means for Al-Qaeda is a determined intelligence effort to keep them under pressure, to crush the cell around the world, not just in Pakistan, Afghanistan, but wherever those cells turn up in the United States and California, Florida, New York City, all the way to Cairo, Jakarta, Europe, and of course the mountains of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Keep the pressure on and keep them debilitated, their ability to really conduct strategic attacks, and try to wind our military occupations down to a minimum. We're going to have to learn to fight them without using major military forces, and I think we'll get there.
There are some cynical views in our part of the world, in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Arab world, and the Muslim world in general, that well, it just can't be that America can't get hold of one man whose name is Osama bin Laden when they can mount major wars in different parts of the world. To what extent would that be true?
Well, we've had some terrorists in the United States. One was called the Unabomber, who sent these bombs through the mail for 19 years. He killed several people, wounded many, and we never found that guy until eventually he wrote a manifesto, and it was published in the Washington Post. And his brother recognized the language and said, hey, that's my brother. He's out in a mountainside in Montana. And we went and arrested the guy. Also, the bomber of this bomb during the Olympics in Atlanta, Eric Rudolph set off that bomb, and he was at large for 10 years running around North Carolina. We couldn't find him. If a terrorist has great discipline and stays hidden, they're hard to find.
Right.
And certainly in the mountains of Afghanistan or Pakistan, we have not been able to get bin Laden or Zawahiri, and they stay very low profile, and we haven't been able to get them. But fortunately, for those operatives that they use to try to keep al-Qaeda active, we have been able to get them, and as a result, al-Qaeda has not had the capability to repeat the attacks of September 11th. on one hand, I find it extraordinary that we haven't caught them for 8 or 9 years. But the other thing that's also almost inexplicable is how poor they have been in replicating another attack.
Right.
Who would have predicted either of those things? That they wouldn't attack us 9 years later, yet neither of them have been captured. It's hard for people to understand those things, so many people come up with conspiracy theories about both of them, but quite frankly, there isn't any explanation.
I know you've done some spectacular work with the counterterrorism NYPD. I'll come to it a bit later, but I'd like to go back to that. You mentioned the attacks at the embassies in Eastern Africa, the attack on USS Cole in the year 2000, immediately after which you were in charge of counterterrorism at the State Department. And there was this famous meeting, National Security Council meeting, after which nothing happened. And you famously said, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for them to strike the Pentagon?
Right.
It was as if you foresaw the future. I would like your reaction to this after a little break. استراحة قصيرة ثم نعود إليكم مع مايكل شيهان الذي كان على رأس مكافحة الإرهاب في وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية في تلك الفترة الحاسمة التي سبقت أحداث 11 من سبتمبر. ابقوا معنا. أهلا بكم مرة أخرى إلى هذا اللقاء الخاص مع السيد مايكل شيهان الذي كان على رأس مكافحة الإرهاب في وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية قبيل أحداث 11 من سبتمبر. Mike, before the break we were talking about this famous incident and what you said after what should have been a crucial meeting in response to such an attack on the USS Cole off the shore of Aden. What made you say that are you waiting for them to attack the Pentagon first?
Yeah, I find myself in an interesting situation. Prior to 9/11, I was beating the drum saying we need to wake up to Al-Qaeda. And after 9/11, I'm saying settle down a little bit, don't overreact. Before 9/11, when the USS Cole was attacked, I thought this was it, because prior to the Cole, I had issued a warning, a formal, official démarche, as we say in the U.S. State Department, to the Taliban leadership saying, if bin Laden or anyone from Al-Qaeda attacks the U.S. again, we are going to hold you, the Taliban, responsible for that attack because you're harboring him. So the USS Cole was attacked. I knew it was Al-Qaeda. I thought everyone else did. But our reaction was slow and sleepy in the U.S. government. I was very surprised, and I was very frustrated. And in my book, I talk about how both parties ignored it. Both at the time, there was a presidential election going on, and Governor Bush was running for president against Vice President Gore, and neither of them really talked about it in the third debate, which was 5 days after the Cole was attacked.
Was that the period that you went to Pakistan and you met with the
I did. I met with the Taliban on various occasions. In Washington, they had an interest section there. I met with them in Pakistan.
With Wakil Mutawakkil, the foreign minister of Taliban.
What Wakil, I never met with him. I talked to him on a phone. I talked to him on a phone for almost 2 hours. And I talked to him about their responsibility to not harbor someone who was threatening the United States and our friends, and that we had evidence that bin Laden was involved in the bombing of our embassies and that he needed to be brought to justice. And he would always argue that we have him under control, he's our guest, we can't do that. And it was but I warned him then. I said, if he's to attack us again, you, the Taliban, will be held accountable. And I said that to them throughout 1999 and 2000. So I thought after the U.S. is cold, this is the time we got to go in there and deal with this issue. We have to deal with the Taliban, hold them accountable. I expected a much more robust American response to this, but we really didn't do anything, and the issue kind of drifted away until September 11th, 2001, almost a year later. And in that case, I think we overreacted. So this is sometimes the American problem. We underreact, and then we overreact. And what I'm advocating for is let's get it right.
It's just, it beats us, it beats me personally, that at that moment of time, when the voting was taken at the end of that meeting, that no one
wanted to do anything
at all.
And I was angry, and I was particularly angry at the military. And I'm a career soldier before I was in the State Department and at the New York City Police Department. And I was angry that the leadership of the Pentagon wasn't reacting more strongly to their warship that was blown up. And that's why I said, what's it going to take? And I was really talking about for the Pentagon. You're going to need to get blown up yourself. I mean, this is one of your warships. It's almost was sank in the port of Yemen, and you're not doing anything about it. And I think perhaps if we had done something stronger then, maybe we would have averted September 11th. If we had gone out there and got after bin Laden and his cells, perhaps 9/11 wouldn't have happened, and all the consequences of the events after 9/11 might have been avoided. And
so to whom did you say later, after 9/11, haven't I told you?
Oh, that's not my way to tell people I told you so. I try not to do that in public. What I tried to do after 9/11 was get back into the business. In this case, I went to New York City to help protect the city from another attack. But it's really not my way to look backwards too much. I try to figure out a way forward and try to help our government find the right approach, to take a measured approach. In New York City, we tried to do that. We couldn't be hysterical in New York City, or people would leave. They wouldn't stay. And so in New York City, we had, again, find that balance where we kept the people of New York City protected. We kept them informed about what's going on, but we told them, don't worry. We've got control of this situation. You can continue to live here and invest here, and tourists to come. So, we tried to keep that balance of a very focused governmental approach, but our public approach was, we've got this under control. We can manage this. Never guaranteeing that there'll never be an attack. You can never guarantee that. But telling people this is a manageable threat. We're on top of this, but let's move forward as a city. Let's rebuild and move forward.
Where were you on 9/11?
I was at the United Nations at the time, and I was working on peacekeeping. I was really focused on the conflicts in the Balkans and East Timor and Africa. I'd moved away from terrorism for a while, so I was at the United Nations, and when the building was attacked, the first building I didn't really pay attention, but when the second plane hit, I knew immediately it was Al-Qaeda. And I called the chief of staff of the United Nations, Iqbal Reis, who's an old friend, and I said, this is an Al-Qaeda attack. He said, Mike, how do you know that? I said, Iqbal, trust me, this is Al-Qaeda. These are the people I know. And I made a few calls to Washington, and I found out that there were other planes that were unknown and missing. And I called Mr. Reis back again. I said, this is Al-Qaeda, and we need to evacuate the building. And he said, why? And I said, well, Al-Qaeda is also an enemy of the UN.
Building. Yeah.
Yes, and they've already attacked. They've attacked New York City. They've attacked the Pentagon. There was rumors that they might attack the White House, which they had really tried to. I said, we don't know how many are out there. There are many planes, perhaps. We need to evacuate the UN. He said, but the UN, would they attack the UN? I said, yes. And obviously, we know now they